So I'm sure you've all noticed this by now, but this is a gaming channel, and it's always been a gaming channel. No matter what kind of content I made, be it reviews, let's plays, or even just replays, the Sleepless Nights channel has always had gaming as its main focus. One more thing that I'm sure some of you have probably noticed is that I love anime. Yes, I am a filthy otaku, basement dweller, gacha game player, Vocaloid enjoyer. Basically name any random degen Japanese bullshit and I'm probably into it, okay? So why am I mentioning this? Why do you all need to hear this? Well, I've been wanting to cover anime on my channel for the longest time, but I didn't really want to stray from the channel's main focus, which is gaming. But today, oh boy today have I found the perfect excuse to talk about anime, or rather something somewhat anime related. Because today is finally the day I get to talk about a visual novel I have waited ages to play. None other than Mahoutsukai no Yoru. To preface things a bit, this video will double as a spoiler-free review for those wanting to read this visual novel for themselves first, and a slightly more in-depth review where I talk about some plot points and character moments and all that jazz. Don't worry, I'll let you all know when we're gonna tread into spoiler territory, but this first half of the video will be pretty much spoiler-free, so you all can rest easy. So anyway, Mahoutsukai no Yoru, which on the Holy Night in English and Mahoyo for short, what is it? So I assume most of my audience has watched anime to some extent during their life, and I don't think anyone would be clicking on this video if they weren't into this type of stuff to begin with, so this saves me a bit of explanation. But nonetheless, allow me to walk you guys through a bit of history. If you know anime, you probably know Fate. Yes, that Fate. The series with gender-bent historical figures, boy kiss are central, and a timeline that looks like this. Yes, the timeline. This is very important because Mahoutsukai actually falls somewhere within this garbled mess of dotted lines and JPEGs. Type Moon, the creators of Fate, for those unfamiliar, have made a bunch of different works outside of the Fate series. If you're strictly an anime watcher, I wouldn't blame you for being unfamiliar because most of their fame outside of Fate comes from visual novels and light novels. All of their works are loosely connected and fall into the same universe dubbed the Nasuverse, after the creator Kinoko Nasu. The first ever game released by Type Moon is Tsukihime, which was also their first big hit, being known as probably one of the best visual novels of its era, spawning a lot of stuff from it like a bunch of remakes and adaptations, a fighting game series, and that thing. Ooh. Of course, the Fate series followed, which spawned even more stuff like a lot of anime, and I mean a lot of anime. Novels, manga, The Greatest Wife of All Time, I love you Saber Alter, and the bullshit gacha game which I hate with all my life, Where is my Melusine? But anyway, this is all besides the point. Mahoyo, the game we were supposed to be talking about before I got completely sidetracked, was actually supposed to come first before all the stuff with stupid cats and pink-haired boys happened. Mahoyo was the very first work by Nasu, which actually predates Type Moon, originally written as a novel by only Nasu himself in 1996, which comes even before Type Moon's earliest work, Kara no Kyokai, which first released as a web novel in 1998. This original version of Mahoyo never got released to the public and was circling around Nasu's group of friends, not being accepted by any publishing agency, remaining unreleased for more than a decade. It wasn't until around 2008, after going through a bunch of different Tsukihime and Fate stuff, and just gathering a whole lot more experience in making visual novels in general, that Type Moon decided it was time to pick up Mahoyo again and remake it in VN format. The original release date was planned to be in 2010, but was then pushed to 2011 and finally ended up releasing on early to mid 2012. But it doesn't end there, my good friends, so hope you guys are still with me here and haven't been bored to death by my little history lecture. Visual novels, or rather the indie or doujin scene in Japan as a whole, are pretty notorious for not really giving too much of a shit about making their work accessible outside of a local audience. A lot of visual novels just never ever get an official translation, and Mahoyo was one of them. Now obviously, people have made ways to consume the novel without having to know Japanese, such as making use of translator apps or making fan translations, but both of these aren't really the best options, since translator apps can be pretty wonky and the writing obviously loses a lot of its nuance when translated by AI, and the fan translation for Mahoyo was never really finished as far as I know. Now obviously, as a massive Type Moon fan, this was very frustrating for me. Mahoyo is one of the only pieces of Type Moon's work that I haven't even laid a single finger on at that point, mostly because I couldn't. I didn't want my experience to be ruined by some wonky AI translation or cut short by an unfinished fan translation. I wanted to experience the game fully in all its glory, so I decided to abstain. However, there's a reason why this video was being made. You probably all read the title when you clicked on it anyway, but on December 14th, 2023, Mahoutsukai no Yoru finally got an official English release on Steam. Now, I've been aware that Mahoyo did get an English release on console a year prior to its Steam release, but I'm a PC guy and I'm not gonna repair my busted PS4 just so I can see anime JPEGs on my TV. Actually, the Steam release happened right under my nose. I did not know it was getting a Steam release at all. What happened was, I was scrolling through games I wanted to get during the Christmas sale, you know, stuff like Baldur's Gate 3 and whatnot. So I added stuff to my cart, got my money, and just took a quick little peek at the front page just to see for more games I might have missed. And miss a game I did because I was greeted by an official Steam release of Mahouyo. I genuinely could not believe my eyes, and saying I was overjoyed is a harsh understatement. Impulse buy. It was way over my budget, I was saving up for Tekken 8 and Under Night 2, but impulse buy. I'm gonna tell you all right now, the snap decision I made that night, that holy night, was one of the best decisions I made. Because the game is absolutely amazing. I've waited years for this moment. The game has been through decades of history, multiple stalled release dates, spending its life in untranslated purgatory, but now it's finally within my grasp. I was beyond excited launching the game for the first time, and I'm super happy to say it blew everything out of the park starting from the very first minute of playtime. Every expectation I've had for it over the many years of wait was met in incredible fashion. My expectations for the game were very high, but what it delivered matched my expectations perfectly. Mahouyo follows the story of Aoko Aozaki, a novice mage living in a mansion atop a mountain with her quote-unquote friend/roommate Alice Kuonji. The two share a sort of unusual relationship where it's not necessarily strained, but they're not exactly open with each other either. They're living together but can be rather distant with each other at times. One rainy morning, Aoko gets called to school on her day off, given a notice that she has a duty as student council president to give a brand new transfer student a tour around her school. This new transfer student, Sojiro Shizuki, is sort of an oddball. He's very much a country bumpkin. Well, in fact, that may be a harsh understatement since he's probably closer to a caveman if anything. He has zero knowledge of any modern day technology, and I mean anything. Even going so far as to thinking a window on the top floor of the school was an exit and almost walking straight out of it. As the story progresses, more and more is revealed about Aoko's past and current situation, and the fate of the three main characters becomes more and more intertwined until it eventually culminates into a finale that may threaten Aoko's being and existence as a whole. Like all of Type Moon's works, Mahouyo takes place in an urban fantasy setting, which is my absolute favorite setting for any piece of media, dark fantasy coming in second place. Type Moon really enjoys making mage duels with a lot of flashy powers coming in left and right, and this game is no exception to that. Naso has an incredible knack for bringing up hype during fight scenes, and I'm really happy to say this game is one of the most hype I've been reading a VN. The tension, the emotions, the voice acting, heightened by the oh so beautiful OST displayed during fights, is utter perfection and some of the best uses of the medium I've ever seen. However, despite all these flashy fights that Type Moon content has come to have been known for over the years, the main focus of Nasu's work are always the characters, and Mahouyo is no different. The game focuses on the dynamic of the main three cast, and how they interact and use each other to develop themselves further. One thing I really like about Mahouyo, and I guess Type Moon as a whole, is how well it implements slice of life elements into the series. One of the biggest gripes I have with a lot of modern battle shonen anime is the lack of downtime. Not saying Mahouyo is a battle shonen, but that's besides the point. I really enjoy being able to sit down with the characters and just spend time watching them in their natural habitat, just doing their mundane day-to-day activities. I really believe this helps humanize the characters a lot and really helps you to connect with them a lot more. It makes them feel like less of characters and more of actual people when you start to pick up on their little personality traits and habits just by watching them interact with each other in a relaxed environment. I'd say the slice of life parts in Mahouyo are just as good, if not a little bit better than its hype action moments. That's not to say the action is bad either, because it is fucking great. I just think Mahouyo struck the perfect balance of slice of life elements and battle sequences. It presents its characters to you wholeheartedly, allowing you to quite literally live with them without losing its core as an action fantasy novel. This has been an ongoing trend with Type Moon, and is one of the reasons why I absolutely adore their works. There's always a lot of downtime, and in fact, the action sequences can be few and far between, but the story never really felt like it was taking a pause. The downtime felt needed, and I don't think the story would have worked as well as it did without it taking the time to relax and allow the reader to spend time with the main cast. The story is very well paced in my opinion, and no portion of it felt like it went on for too long. Every moment in the story, even just the character sitting down on a couch drinking tea, felt like it was there to serve a purpose and not just useless fluff to pad the runtime. I'd say the start of the game may have been a bit slow, but that's pretty typical for VNs anyway, and once it picks up, it never really lets down. There's not a single stretch in the game that felt unnecessarily dragged or boring to read, and I found myself decently entertained all throughout. The only sort of nitpick, if you can even call it a nitpick, that I have with Mahouyo is that its peak moments don't reach as high as Type Moon's other works like Fate for example. But to be fair, beating Fate's peak moments is a Herculean task in and of itself. Overall though, Mahoutsukay is a very consistent reading experience, and there is no point in this run that I thought it was bad or boring or anything like that. I was thoroughly entertained all throughout my time spent with it, and I don't regret a single second reading it. The cherry on top all of this is that the game is absolutely gorgeous. It's probably the single best looking VN I've ever played. The art is absolutely stellar, as expected from a modern Type Moon game, but the real standout is the amazing sprite work they have. The sprites are super dynamic and utilized to their fullest potential, having full-on blocking and composition in the shots. Sometimes I can't even tell if what I'm looking at is a sprite or an Avenged CG, to be completely honest. The game also makes use of a lot of animation and flashy effects to really enhance the experience. Not just the fight scenes, but even quieter moments as well. This is all brought together by the godsend of an OST the game has. Hands down one of the best soundtrack I've ever heard from a VN. The end credits even being a Ryo arrangement. This probably doesn't mean much for a lot of you, but as a Vocaloid junkie, goddamn that's huge. To me, story always comes first when it comes to VNs, with visuals not really being all that important to me. But in my time reading through Mahoutsukay, I've had to just pause and take in the scenery because some moments of the game just look absolutely stunning. If there's one thing I can say when recommending this game to people, is that I'm not really sure if it's the best intro to Type Moon. If you haven't consumed Type Moon media, I'm not sure how well you'd receive a lot of the info dumps the game has. For those unaware, the Type Moon universe has its own power system that it uses in all of its works. It's pretty complicated and is an entire rabbit hole to go down into, but bottom line is, if you're unfamiliar with Type Moon, a lot of the conversations they have in this game is going to sound pretty alien. I think they do explain a lot of the power system in this game, but as someone who's become all too familiar with it over the years, I wasn't really paying much attention to the info dumps as I already knew what they were talking about for the most part. I don't know if someone completely new to the franchise would be able to pick up a lot of the in-universe mechanics presented to them in this game, but overall, I think it might be one of the better starting points in the series, as it's relatively short and the story is pretty self-contained, so you don't necessarily need to have any prior knowledge going into it. It just might make the info dumps faster to understand if you do. I really don't think there's a better time to pick up Mahoutsukay or just get into Type Moon overall than right now. It's the first Type Moon VN to get an official English translation and an official Steam release on top of that. If you're an anime enjoyer, there's gonna be a movie adaptation of the game by Ufotable coming out sooner or later, which I'm super excited for, especially seeing Ufotable finally go back to Type Moon. It's going to be the first Type Moon adaptation they've had since the Final Heaven's Feel movie, which is released way back in 2020. I don't know how much of the game the movie adaptation will cover, but I am almost 100% sure they won't cover the entire thing, so I still highly suggest playing through the game. I highly recommend this game to anyone even slightly interested in the genre. Very good stuff. So from this point onwards, I'll be going more in depth about the plot and the characters for Mahoutsukay, and just give my overall thoughts about the story as a whole. This section of the video will contain many major spoilers, not just for Mahoutsukay but for many of Type Moon's other works such as Kara no Kyokai and Fate, as many characters go across stories. If you plan on getting into Type Moon, I really highly suggest you click off this video now, as it will not only be spoiling multiple different series, but also skipping a lot of explanation about the world and its characters, as I'm going under the assumption that you're already familiar with them. You can just stop here, save this video to a playlist or something, go read a visual novel, you can even watch Fate or whatever, then come back here once you're done. Or not, it's up to you I suppose, just don't say I didn't warn you. So where do I begin? Oh lord, there's a lot to cover, but I guess I'll start with the main three cast, Aoko, Alice, and Sojiro. I'll be completely honest here, even if I dubbed myself a massive Type Moon fan, I knew basically nothing about the main cast going into Mahoutsukay, which I did on purpose of course. I didn't want to spoil myself about who they were, and I wanted to be able to take on their characters blindly and see whatever surprises are in store for me. Aoko, as a character, is obviously someone I've been somewhat acquainted with. I've read parts of Tsukihime and played Melty Blood, so her face and name is pretty familiar to me. I also knew that she was related to another character from Kara no Kyokai named Toko Aozaki, who I'll also get to later on in this video. Anyway, I was really excited to get to know Aoko. I've seen her face plastered all over Type Moon works for ages, but I never really knew who she was outside of her name, and honestly I'd say she's a great character. I'm all for strong female leads, and Aoko definitely fits that bill. I normally have mixed feelings towards tsundere characters, and they definitely can become my least favorite character trope if done very wrong, but when it hits that sweet spot, it's pretty good, and Aoko does just that. She really likes making a lot of snide remarks and just being overall very hot-headed, especially towards Sojiro, but it never really feels unreasonable, and where she draws the line on things is always very clear. Speaking of Sojiro, I think he's a great character for what he is. I don't know the general consensus on Sojiro, but I'd assume people don't really like him much since he does feel a bit cardboard on his own, but that's if he's on his own. Remember, Mahoutsukay is a game that focuses a lot on character dynamics, and Sojiro's role as the voice of reason among the main three is a very good one. Ako and Alice are both crazy mages with an obvious crazy way of thinking about things, so Sojiro being quite literally the humanizing portion of the group is really refreshing. He's very mundane, bland, and normal, but that is exactly what he's meant to represent. He's meant to be the straight man in a twisted world, and I think he does it great. Finally, Alice. Oh, Alice, 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 I love you. I'm all for the kudere or crazy girl gap moe archetype. Some of my favorite characters are ones exactly like that. Saber Alter from Fate, Yosuke from Monogatari, and Burn Castell from Omineko to name a few. Alice perfectly fits into both the kudere and the straight up crazy girl archetype, being completely unhinged in a calm type of way, just bluntly letting you know the 18 different ways she's going to tear you to pieces. Now obviously she's not an evil character and she has a lot of genuine feel-good moments, but her introduction as a stone-faced killer makes these wholesome moments all the more heart-melting to me. Double Gap Moe. She's introduced as someone who doesn't care too much about things but actually does and is completely batshit insane, but also someone who has a good moral code and is very capable of caring about the people around her. Now these three characters are solid on their own, but their dynamic with each other is on a whole different level. The way they develop throughout the story with Aoko and Alice both slowly opening up to Sojiro is just peak character development in my opinion. Sojiro learns how to live in our modern world and learns when to throw away reason and listen to what his heart tells him. Likewise, Aoko and Alice learn that magecraft isn't everything, and sometimes some of our greatest strengths can be found in being human. I absolutely adore the little conversations they have during these types of live segments, and I'd honestly be fine with an entire story of just the three of the characters living their day-to-day lives in the Kuonji estate. One of Type Moon's greatest strengths is just making character dynamics, even if it doesn't really matter when it comes to the main plot. We don't need to know all these little bits and pieces about the characters. Shiro being good at cooking shouldn't matter when it comes to him fighting a Holy Grail war, but it's things like these that make Fate cooking spin-offs possible and work so damn well. The characters aren't a supplement to the story but are completely solid on their own and can be very entertaining even in a vastly different scenario. As much as I love the fights in Mahoyo, I don't think the VN would have been nearly as good without these small character moments sprinkled throughout the story. Some moments, especially towards the end of the VN, wouldn't only feel completely out of place and lacking in motives, but also not hit as hard as it did without the great character dynamics presented to us throughout the run of the game. Now though, what is a main cast without a villain? Let's talk about her. Toko as a villain, I kinda have mixed feelings about, to be completely honest. Before anything, I want to just make it clear that I don't think she's a bad villain. I think she does her job well, but I have a hard time viewing her as a proper villain. Let me explain. As I mentioned a while ago, I have seen the entirety of Kara no Kyokai, or Garden of Sinners in English, and Toko plays a very big leading role in that series. A good person role, to be exact. She helps out the main character Shiki with a lot of stuff and does a lot of good things even outside of Kara no Kyokai. For example, she was the one who saved Chiro's life at the end of Heaven's Feel, providing him with a puppet body so that he can live on even after his real body got turned into a hunk of metal and got absorbed by the Holy Grail or something. Now, Toko has always been a strong, hot-headed, and slightly crazy character much like her sister, but she was never really presented as inherently bad. So now that she plays the villain role, I have a really hard time wrapping my head around it. A lot of her actions, especially if you're used to how things work in the Nasuverse, can be very much justified or considered normal at the very least. The worst thing she's ever done in the story is be ruthless in attacking people, but that's pretty much the norm when it comes to mage duels anyway, with all the characters within the story being aware of that fact as well. I really like Toko as a character. I think she's great and has a lot of entertainment value, but as a villain she seems a bit lacking. She's missing that rage-inducing factor that I look for with a lot of villains I enjoy watching, and it was very hard for me to dislike her character even though that's kind of the main point of a villain. She definitely has her dynamic with Aoko, but she doesn't really feel like an unstoppable object or the perfect opposite force to her, unlike some of Type Moon's other villains like Kirei Tushiro for example. The thing is though, I don't know if this is just because of the way I was introduced to her and the fact that I got pretty warmed up towards her character after watching like 8 movies with her in it. I have a hard time distancing myself from familiar characters and I was just viewing her as an old friend I was meeting again after a long time, rather than an antagonistic force towards the main cast, but that might just be a me thing. I still think she's great and her final clash with Aoko was nothing short of breathtaking, creating one of my favorite sceneries in all of Type Moon alongside stuff like Unlimited Blade Works. She does her job as an antagonist and doesn't really pull any punches. It's just that I have difficulty viewing her as a bad person even before the game humanized her through backstory and such. Segueing into the next thing, set pieces. They're great. Mahoutsukai has some of the most insane set pieces I've ever seen from a visual novel. From Aoko shooting an entire fucking laser cannon at the literal moon, to the beautiful scenery of what I assume to be the afterlife brought into the real world by the fifth magic. It's nothing short of breathtaking. It's for this reason that I cannot wait for the ufotable adaptation of this visual novel, and I can only pray that they adapt the entire game since the final chapter is some of my favorite moments visually from any VN I've read so far. Ufotable time and time again has proved that they are beyond capable of adapting these eye candy moments from the Type Moon franchise, and I'm super excited to see the visual novel come to life in anime form. The structure of the game is perfect in my opinion, alternating between slice of life and action sequences with two major fights being Aoko vs Alice and Aoko vs Toko. The game is definitely not as fight heavy as Type Moon's other works, but like I said, it's probably the most character focused one. I think the general consensus is that Mahoutsukai is one of the weaker entries by Type Moon. I don't really have a statement on this as I haven't really read through all of Tsukihime yet, and I have an incredibly high bias towards Fate as it's probably my favorite piece of media ever, but I really don't think Mahoutsukai is a bad game. I don't know if people just aren't a fan of the characters or just wish it was as action heavy as other Type Moon entries, but I personally love the slice of life elements as I said multiple times throughout this video. My favorite parts of the game are whenever Alice and Sojiro spend some quiet time together, just opening up to each other and getting to know themselves more. Honestly, Sojiro and Alice's relationship is my favorite thing from this game, but obviously that's just my bias for Alice speaking. Mahoutsukai can get very wholesome with its slice of life sections and you really feel the characters warming up to each other during these parts. Even though the slice of life sections are wholesome like any Type Moon game, it can get dark really fast. Nasu is really good at ricocheting between calm, wholesome slice of life to the darkest thing you will ever see all day. Mahoutsukai doesn't really get as dark as Tsukihime or Fate does, especially with the Heaven's Feel route of Fate being pretty much full-on psychological horror at times, but the game still has its fair share of gritty moments typical of Type Moon. I've always enjoyed these darker moments and I'm glad that Mahoutsukai was able to deliver on them for the most part. Overall, Mahoutsukai no Yoru is a very consistent, character-driven game that has been honestly one of the best VNs I've read in recent times. It has great character dynamics, eye candy visuals, and some of the finest soundtracks ever made. It certainly stands on the same level of quality as any other piece of media made by Nasu himself, and I can wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone. It's not that long with a run of around 30 hours, but it is paced perfectly and there's a lot of content put into those 30 hours of playtime. I really enjoyed my time with it and I can only pray for the future of Type Moon localizations coming on Steam. I really hope they make these visual novels more accessible to the general public since these are some of the best pieces of media I've ever touched in my life. I cannot stress how in love I am with this franchise, and Mahoutsukai definitely added fuel to that ever-growing fire of Type Moon obsession burning deep within me. And pause! Post-editing me here, just had to put this part in, completely unscripted. I was gonna end the video right here with my typical, you know, just begging for likes and whatnot. But anyway, I was supposed to end the video here, but while editing, I don't know what happened. I guess the gods heard me. But Fate Stay Night is getting a Steam release. What? I am in complete disbelief. This news came out of nowhere. I had no idea once again that this was happening. But Fate Stay Night is getting a Steam release and it looks like Mahoutsukai was the catalyst for a very bright future of Type Moon releases on Steam, and I am beyond excited to see what Type Moon has in store for its Western audience. This is gonna be huge and I really cannot wait for this to happen. But yeah, excuse me if this is a bit abrupt, but I'm just gonna have to end the video there. I was planning to end it right here anyway, but I really hope you all enjoyed. Put a lot of work into this one. I'm sorry, it took a while to come out. Went through a lot of footage, went through a lot of editing and whatnot. But nonetheless, I really hope you all enjoyed. As always, you know what to do, like, comment, subscribe. You know, just all that jazz. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.